In listen-only mode.
All right, calling to order Historic Landmarks Commission, October 28th, 2020. So let's start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. I'll begin the roll call. Chair Grumbine.
Here.
Vice Chair House.
Here.
Commissioner Drury. Absent. Commissioner Edmonds.
Here.
Commissioner Lundvik.
Here.
Commissioner Mahan.
Here.
Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll start with public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within its jurisdiction that is not scheduled on this agenda for a public discussion. So is there anyone that would like to comment? You can raise your hand on these instructions.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. So to any attendees that are present in your control panel, you should see a hand icon. If you would like to speak on an item not on today's agenda, you may click that hand icon and it will notify the organizers that you would like to speak. Let's give it another minute. And Chair Grumbine, I do not see any hands raised at this time. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, so now we'll go on to the approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission October 14th meeting.
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right, motion by Uli, second by Vice Chair House. Under discussion, any edits, changes?
Mr. Chair, I had one. Okay, I found the minutes. Would be on page 5. Item 4 in the motion. Comment 5, if the gable roof is kept, we should clarify that if the gable roof on the west elevation is kept.
Okay.
I think that's the only thing I had.
All right, any other edits? Commissioner Lundvik?
Yes, on page 4, commission comments, number 4, push the entry to the parking garage, not to the drive, push the entry to the parking garage back on the Montecito Street elevation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep. Okay, that's good, that's more clear.
Yeah, I don't understand item 10. I don't know where that relates to.
I didn't either.
And I just don't know, I hate to leave something in there which I don't know what we were talking about. Now, if that
I believe it was where we were concerned with what they were proposing, I think in plan, a noise reduction wall along whatever it was, Castillo or whatever, and they weren't showing it in elevation, and we were concerned with how that actually looked and what that looked like and how that worked with the building, if I remember correctly.
Maybe we should change it
And
to
so
show the sound
with the-
reduction wall on the elevations.
Yeah, okay.
It's really a courtyard.
And the design, why don't we say the design for the noise reduction wall in elevation or on the elevations?
The other item that concerns me, I specifically critiqued the project for the lack of pedestrian, the pedestrian relationship to the ground floor elevations on Montecito Street. And I suggested they look at other residential buildings, residences in the neighborhood to see how they have handled the front, the front of the house, the front of the building to the street, because it was not a good solution that they came up with on the Montecito Street frontage from the standpoint of pedestrian friendly elevation. And that is not mentioned here. We can leave it without being mentioned, but I certainly am concerned when it comes back and they have addressed that.
So, unfortunately, I don't think we can add it to the comments now because it was a discussion. I think it would have had to been put in the motion or added to the motion at the time. And not necessarily everything gets added to the motion as a comment, but perhaps if we can remember that the next time it comes up, we can bring that up as an additional thing that was also commented on, because it's not only the comments in the official full comments that we're allowed to bring up. So I think that and it's not given it wasn't, this wasn't an appealable action or anything like that. So these were just comments. So I think we can just make sure we bring it up the next time as well. But I think I'd be hesitant to try to add it to the motion now or to the comments now, because we didn't officially make it such when we were making the motion.
Right. As long as
Mr.
we,
Chair, I would suggest that the secretary review the tape. I remember clearly that Commissioner Lenvick made a strong point about that, and it should have made the comment list. So I would suggest that the tape be checked again, and if that comment is incorporated, it should be listed.
Through the chair to Commissioner Woolley, we'll re-review the tape and double check that that was part of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other edits, Commissioner Lenvick?
no, that's all I had.
Okay. Anyone else with any other edits? So I guess the motion would be to continue the minutes with those, and we'll have to wait till next time to ratify them. Is that right, Ms. Plummer?
Mr. Chair, it's at your discretion if you'd like to continue the minutes to the next meeting, or if you just would like staff to re-review the tape and confirm that language, and include in your acceptance of it that you're requesting staff to do that.
Mr. Chair,
I'm comfortable with
Yeah.
that.
Vice Chair House?
perhaps we could approve the minutes today for the benefit of applicants who depend on the minutes. And then we could approve an amendment to the minutes at the next meeting. Is that a possibility? Okay.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. And that way, if there is something found, otherwise we can just have a discussion and leave it as we had passed it today. Okay, sounds good. Let's do that.
I'm good with the comment made as the motion maker.
As
All
am
right,
I.
and Vice Chair House?
Yes.
All right, so with that, let's do a roll call and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. Begin the roll call. Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvick,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Abstain?
Commissioner Edmonds, Is Commissioner Edmonds still on?
Commissioner Edmonds?
I do not. Oh, I thought I was gonna sneeze. I do not see Commissioner Edmonds in our attendee list. So I will mark her absent for this. And hopefully we can get her back. Pilar, is that all right with you?
Yes, that's correct. It looks like she dropped off. So just, I think for this, she'll have to be absent. And then hopefully she can jump on soon.
Sounds good.
And then Chair Grumbine?
Yes.
All right, that is unanimous with one abstention from Mahan, and Commissioner Edmonds is absent. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are on to approval of the consent calendar for October 28th, 2020. Ms. Palmer?
Approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Yeah, sorry, we should. All right, motion by Uli, second by House, and Ms. Palmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item A, 131 Castillo Street received project design approval and final approval as submitted.
Okay. And I see we have Commissioner Edmonds back. All right. Okay, so with that, any other discussion on the consent calendar? All right, so let's have a roll call vote to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And could I just confirm who made the motion and who was the seconder?
Uli House.
Uli and House.
Thank you so much. I will begin the roll call vote. Commissioner Lenvick,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Abstain.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yeah.
That is unanimous with one abstention. Thank you so much.
All right, on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuance and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just formally announcing that Commissioner Drury will be absent from today's meeting, and then Ms. Hernandez has an announcement.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, commissioners.
Hi.
I
Oh,
do have one announcement. We have been really working on the Historic Resources Ordinance, and because it's going in the zoning ordinance, there's been quite a bit more formatting changes than the last time you saw it. So we're going to bring it back to you one more time before it goes on to the PC and City Council, just because it looks a lot different, even though all the content that we went through is there, but we want you to look at it like it's a familiar document. We are trying to get it posted in the next few days. So we'll send you all an email the minute it's posted, trying to get you as much time as possible to review it. And that's my announcement today.
Great, thank you. All right, other announcements? All right, one, I guess, would go under announcements just in terms of, and I know that some of you know this, and some of you were there as well, but as a, as city, those of you who don't know, City Council reviewed, and that is my understanding, it was a different application. It wasn't the same that we denied of the e-bike application for, and as I understand it, is for putting them in the road, in the road, not on the sidewalk, in the road, and it was as a as part of the temporary but temporary as in up to 3 years trial period for it, and so that was what went before City Council, and City Council approved the exception. I myself spoke about it, and I believe Vice Chair House did as well, and perhaps others of you as well. As I spoke from my own, as an individual, not as from HLC, but I did give a sort of a background of some of our discussion for the related, similar, but different submission that was put before us and some of our concerns. And also my concern for this becoming a precedent for a way of not having to review things by City Council. So, not having to review things through HLC by just short-circuiting things. So that was what, if any of you want to listen to the transcript or anything, that's what happened this last Tuesday. Or sorry, not this last Tuesday, that would have been yesterday, but the week before. So, any other announcements? Or any of those? Okay, let's move on to item E, subcommittee reports. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Lenvick.
Weren't you appointed by the council to serve on?
Oh, yeah, kind of. They volunteered me to, I get for speaking up, stick your neck out. They volunteered me to help review some of the stuff that they're deciding on for State Street right now, which I think is at least a good idea to have someone on HLC, especially considering the way in which things are being kind of pushed through as emergency things or not, or related things, but are still going to be around for a while. So yeah, that the details of that haven't been worked out, but yes, a couple of the council members mentioned wanting me to be on that. So I'll let you all know how that progresses, and if I am on it and how those pieces are, I'll report back, and just to keep everyone up to speed. But during this, and as well to ask for other volunteers if we need it to get help with some questions, and especially these temporary measures that are seemingly a lot less temporary than everything is at first pass. So yeah,
maybe
that's all.
Maybe staff can answer this. Did the special committee on State Street meet already this week? Pilar, do you know?
Through the chair to Commissioner Lenvick. Unfortunately, I'm not aware if they met this week, but I can confirm. I'll confirm with Mr. Dayton about that, and I'll send an email response about it.
I hope that
Great, thanks.
I hope that Chair Grumbine can be in attendance at those meetings. I think our voice should be present at the early stages of planning as opposed to the end of planning. So if you can, it's a good deal.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I have sent a letter to that effect as well from earlier on when the parklets were happening, that I thought that that someone from HLC should be there. And so I think one way or the other, if they are in times when I can't be, I'll ask for other volunteers to, so we make sure we have some HLC input early on, because I agree. There's a lot of decisions being made right now that really should have some HLC input. Yeah, Commissioner House?
Yes, they did meet this week, and I watched it on the TV, and nothing of consequence came out of it. It was just a lot of procedural stuff and plan for the future.
Okay. I'll follow up with that, and actually, Pilar, if you could as well, I'll follow up with getting into those things as well, making sure that we're keeping HLC up to speed and having some HLC input to them. So, okay. Any other announcements or subcommittee reports? I guess we're on now. All right. If there's no other subcommittee reports, Commissioner Mahan, I have a frozen picture for you. I just wanted to make sure that you're on audio in case you did have a subcommittee report.
He's just giving a thumbs up to everything.
Okay.
Commissioner Uli, did
Very
you want to?
agreeable today.
I do not have a
Want to
subcommittee.
download them on the
Okay.
African American Black Context Study meeting we had?
Yeah, you can, unless you want me to.
Sure, I'll do, you can let me know if you have some things to add. We did have our first meeting with the advisory committee to work on preparing a grant to do a African American Black context study through the State Historic Preservation Office. And mostly we just are laying the timeline before the grant is due next year, and the timeline once we're under the grant, because they're so very specific. And we'll be bringing a draft of the grant hopefully to the commission in January and council in February, knowing that we're applying for it as part of the grant process, so that we'll be all set to go. We get it. And that was pretty much where we're at. It's a lot of prep work, and I know like when it's due seems like a long way away, which is late April or May, but that's like tomorrow in city time, the way we have to go through so many things. Anything else, Commissioner Lee?
No, it was a lively discussion with all the participants about its purpose and how you navigate the process and how long that process is. And generally, my sense was patience is very short for action, but grants take what they take and require what they require, and there isn't any way to shortcut that process. So, but it was a lively discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Any other reports, subcommittee or otherwise? All right, let's move on to item 1, structure of merit designation for 1400 Dover Road. This is a review of a staff report and public hearing to consider structure of merit designation of the Iceberg House, a mid-century modern style house designed by noted architect Luda Maria Riggs in 1963. All right. Ms. Hernandez?
Thank you, commissioners and Mr. Chair. As mentioned, I'm just going to review the criteria for which 1400 Dover Road, the Iceberg House, qualifies as a structure of merit. First slide, please. It is up on a hill, so it was a little difficult to photograph. But despite that, this was nominated by Commissioner Lenvik as a structure of merit and reviewed at the designation subcommittee meeting in July, and proper notice given to the owners. This, as outlined before, was designed in 1963 by Luda Maria Riggs, FAIA, and it does qualify for 4 of the criteria outlined in the municipal code. Next slide, please. So this is one of her original drawings and of the house, and it really illustrates that it is really intact and very minimal changes have been done to the exterior of the building. It does also illustrates the same owner because it was done for the Icebergs, and that is who still owns the building, interestingly enough. And it does qualify under criterion A because it is a Luda Maria Riggs FAIA building designed in 1963 in the mid-century modern style. So it is important to the heritage of Santa Barbara. It qualifies under criterion D as it exemplifies the mid-century modern style. And I just want to do a little brief overview of that for the public. Why mid-century modern is important in Santa Barbara is that after World War II, that there was a reverse in the pattern of period design architecture popular in the earlier half of the 20th century. The Iceberg House demonstrates the modernist influenced architectural style, a style that's not common in Santa Barbara. It's a style that's representative of a very brief period in post-World War II Santa Barbara, during which architects introduced new non-Spanish influenced architectural themes, asymmetrical flat facades, rectilinear flat roofs, metal and glass compositions with open plans, smooth wall surfaces, and no decorative detailing characterize the mid-century modern style. It creates an architectural style that took advantage of new materials brought about by the modern industrial civilization. Architects look to invent the new style on the landscape of the mid-century. Ludmilla Riggs designed this to express the character-defining features of the mid-century modern style, showcasing three predominant characteristics: a clean, minimalist aesthetic, an emphasis on bringing the outdoors in, and presentation of straight lines and angular structures. And it is also significant because it is the work of a person who has significantly influenced Santa Barbara, and that is Ludmilla Riggs. She was one of the first women to attend Berkeley at the University of California in 1918 in architectural studies. As well as she worked with George Washington Smith in the 1920s in the Spanish colonial revival style. And her talent really allowed her to smoothly transition her style through the 1930s, 40s, and into the mid-century to really allow her to create excellent buildings as time and styles changed in our community. And finally, one more slide, Timmy, please. Under Criterion I, this is a unique mid-century modern building and landscape, and represents an established and familiar feature in the neighborhood since 1963. And in addition, the house next door is a mid-century modern style house designed by nationally recognized architect Richard Neutra. So together they really create an intact streetscape representing the mid-century modern style. And as a side note, I am working with the owners of the Neutra house to try and designate that as well. They asked for a postponement right before COVID, and I haven't heard back from them. But together, they make a really important feature in our community. And I recommend the HLC pass a resolution to designate 1400 Dover Road as a structure of merit. And that concludes my
Great,
presentation.
thank you. All right, great. Okay, so now let's go to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment, please follow the instructions, raise your hand virtually.
So to any attendees that are currently watching, if you would like to speak on this item, you can go to your control panel and you should see a hand icon that when clicked notifies the organizers that you would like to speak. You'll be limited to 2 minutes. And Mr. Chair, I do not see any hands raised at this time.
All right.
Thank you. And I'll just ask Ms. Rydell, did
Okay,
we
we'll go.
receive any written correspondence on this item?
Thank you, Pilar, and to the chair. No, we did not receive any written correspondence for this item.
Mr. Chair, I'll move
Okay, in that case,
I'll move to adopt the resolution to designate this parcel as a structural of merit.
I'll second that.
all right. Motion by Uli, second by Lenvik. Under discussion. Any discussion, questions about the report, anything else? All right. In that case, we'll do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Vice Chair House.
Sorry, my mic was off.
Sorry,
Yes,
slip.
Is that a yes? I'm sorry.
yes. Again,
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Want to
Okay,
thank
so we are,
want to thank Commissioner Limbick for bringing that forward. This is a great, excellent example of a mid-century building.
yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lenvik. All right, we are on to, we're 1 minute early. We're on to item number 2, 1230 San Andreas Street, archaeology report. This is a proposal to demolish 2 existing dwellings, a garage and shed structure, and removal of various non-native vegetation to allow for construction of a new 3-story multi-unit residential building. The building will be comprised of 7 two-bedroom rental units ranging in size from 856 to 922 square feet, with an average unit size of 904 square feet using the city's AUD program. The proposed density of 11,500 square foot lot is 27 dwelling units per acre on a parcel with a general plan land use designation of medium high density, 15 to 27 units per acre. The project includes 7 individual parking garages totaling 1,500 square feet, trash enclosures, site utilities, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, relocation of the driveway, and new landscaping and hardscaping throughout. The project includes a request for waiver by the Architectural Board of Review to allow for a 3-foot interior setback reduction for covered parking on a lot 55 feet or less. This is requesting acceptance of the Phase 1 Archaeological Resources Report prepared by David Stone, Wood Environmental and Infrastructure Solutions, Inc. And Ms. Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unfortunately, Mr. Stone was not able to be present at this meeting, but the report was reviewed by Dr. Glassow, and he was in agreement with the recommendations and conclusions within the report.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in that case, why don't we go, I guess we could go to public comment. So any member of the public wishing to comment at this point, please follow the instructions and raise your hand.
So
And
do
this
any
is a comment on the
attendees?
archaeological report.
That's correct. If you would like to give comments just on the archaeological report, you can go to your control panel and you should see a hand icon that when clicked will notify the organizers that you would like to speak. And Mr. Chair, I do not see any hands raised at this time. And Ms. Raydell, can you confirm if we received any written correspondence?
Thank you, Pilar. And to the chair, no, we did not receive any written correspondence for this item.
Thank you.
All right. So back to so we'll close public comment and back to the commission for discussion of the archaeology report. Anything you see that are any questions that you have on it or anything else? Any reason why you couldn't?
Mr. Chair, I'll move acceptance of the archaeological report for this project.
I'll second that.
Motion by Uli, second by Edmonds. Any last discussion? All right, do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yeah.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are running 7 minutes ahead, I think, or so. Are we good to go to continue on to the next item, Ms. Plummer? And if the attendees are here or the applicant are here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're within the time allowed to start this item and the applicant is present.
Okay, great. Let's get it kicked off. So we are on to item 3, 215 East Victoria Street. This is a continued item, concept review. This is for a 12,900 square foot lot. It's currently developed with 3 unit buildings fronting Victoria Street and a 3-unit building fronting Victoria Street and 2 two-story buildings towards the rear lot. Proposal to demolish the existing 1,000 square foot garage, the existing 2-story building, a 3-bedroom unit, existing 2-story building, a 2-bedroom unit, and 45 square foot shed in order to construct 2 new 2-story apartment buildings. The 3 existing units in the front building are proposed to remain. The 8-unit project will be developed under the average unit size density incentive program. The residential unit mix will include 4 1-bedroom units and 4 2-bedroom units. with an average unit size of 950 square feet. Minor improvements are proposed to the front of the building, including removal of an existing stair from the side yard and reconfiguring the stair located at the front yard. The existing driveway and parking areas will remain, with new paving and new landscaping throughout the site. Staff hearing officer review is required for an open yard modification. This is for concept review. No final appealable decision will be made this hearing. The project was last reviewed on August 19th, 2020. And do we have, okay, there we go. Okay, so why don't we get applicant here, and then we'll go through the motion from previously, and we'll go from there.
Hello, Chair Grumbine and
Plummer,
Commissioners.
oh yeah. Hello, welcome. You're a voice from above.
So Mr. Vermillion, Mr. Vermillion, I'm going to ask you to turn on your webcam. I just sent you a webcam request. Perfect.
Oh, there
And
we
then
are.
before you begin your presentation, I'm going to ask Chair Grumbine if you'll go through the minutes from the last meeting, and I'll have some very brief staff comments before we go into the applicant presentation. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So the motion from last time was to continue indefinitely with the following comments. One, in general, the commission finds the red tile roofs and flat plaster parapet roofs to be moving in the right direction. Two, the roof element massing is acceptable. Three, the 9-foot parapet roof areas seem to be acceptable. In four, in general, the commission feels there is too much plaster above the windows. Five, the massing of the parking garage is too contemporary, especially on the west elevation. Six, the corner window treatments are too contemporary. Seven, the use of horizontal wood siding is too contemporary and not appropriate for El Pueblo Viejo. Eight, the site plan needs to show the adjoining off-site building. Nine, show building perspectives from across the street and adjacent views. 10, provide cross sections from neighboring buildings. 11, confirm if solar access applies to this project, and if so, the potential impact on neighbors. 12, window screenings should be traditional and metal shrouds are not acceptable. 13, consider other circulation patterns for parking to enable change in carport parking and circulation and enable the lower building level more traditional and appropriate for El Pueblo Viejo. The motion was by Uli, the second was by Mahan. It was 6-0-0. Edmonds and Vena were absent. The motion carried. All right, Ms. Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as it said in the project description and in the footer, this project is here for conceptual review today. It does still need to go to the staff hearing officer prior to coming back to Historic Landmarks Commission for an official decision on the design. So I'll ask in your review today to consider as well the open yard modification that's being requested and any particular comments you might have about the aesthetic appropriateness of that for our staff hearing officer's review. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, now, so if you could introduce yourself and then as well, perhaps go through an overview of the project, and then if you would, because there's the long list, if you can go through those items and talk about how you answered those, or all the whatever 15 or so comments. I don't want to mess up your rhythm, so present however you want, but I think that'll be important to kind of cover in terms of making sure we're covering all the discussion items. And then we have a 15-minute timer up, and if you can try to stay within that, that'll be good. It might take a little longer because there were a lot of comments, so we can kind of go through it and give you some more time if needed. So, but at least that'll be our guideline.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Grumbine. Hello, Commissioners. So there are a couple of changes with regard to the overall density of this project, and some of which is a response to the last set of comments from the commissioners, And some are frankly reflective of the newly adopted AUD program guidelines and requirements. So since this project falls within the central business district, there is no longer parking required for this property. We are providing plenty of spaces, but we are no longer held to the number of spaces of 1 per unit. So that was one change. Another change was the number of units. We've dropped from 9 AUD units and an attached ADU down to a total of 8 units. So 4 2-bedrooms and 4 1-bedrooms. So it's a smaller project from that perspective. And what the other thing we've done as a response to some of the comments was to work to reduce the auto court area. And in addition to that, the actual parking spaces provided. And we've worked to create a large central courtyard that the 2 new buildings will share between them. So if we could go through the next few slides, I think we're familiar with the existing property, commercial building on one side, residential property on the other, the survey. So let's go to A101. That's where we'll start to see a differing approach. So you can see the front building remains as is with the slight change to the front stair in the front yard. So instead of exiting the stair into the driveway area, we're now exiting it to what essentially is the north along the staired walkway from the sidewalk. So you'll note that before we had 2 long buildings with single loaded parking underneath them. Now we've changed to 1 building with parking beneath it and 1 side open parking. Because again, with the new guidelines, covered parking is not required. And as I said, in CBD, no parking is actually required. So we're here showing 7 total spaces for 8 units on the entire property. You'll note that on the side of the carport areas, you've got a trash room and an electrical mechanical room, and then there's some massing on the other side so that we could get kind of this arched look that we wanted for mailboxes and perhaps some other mechanical space. So the square footage of the driveway area is probably cut in half because now you need to turn as you come in and either make a U-turn into the parking or drive straight into the parking rather than driving along the driveway as existing and turning right into all of the parking spaces. So of course that frees up a little more space for us for gardens and landscaping. And you can see the large common courtyard between buildings 2 and 3. So building 2 will have 1 1-bedroom unit on the back side of the parking. Above that, via stairway, will be a single 2-bedroom unit with a large outdoor deck. And if you maybe just zoom out just a little so we could see both plans as they would stack. So there's a generous outdoor private deck for that upper unit that faces the courtyard. And then as you go to this back building, there is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit on ground level. And then if you take the stairway up on that side, on the north side, or let's say the east side, sorry, you'd come to another upper level 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit, 2 private balconies on that unit. And then the golden unit in the back is a 2-story unit with an entrance through the main courtyard, access to the 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, etc. on the lower level, and then the living, dining, kitchen area with a private outdoor deck on the 2nd level. So again, all buildings 2-story. We've worked hard to reduce the heights slightly, so you'll see that in the elevations. Again, the existing building with its hipped roofs is in the neighborhood of 23 feet tall to the peaks. And we've worked really hard. I think our tallest building above grade is 23.6 in this new revised design. So go to the next sheet. So there's the roof plan. You can see we've stuck with a majority of tiled clay roofs, simple gables. We still, however, want a good amount of flat roofs for solar panels. The intent is that this project be completely electric and supplied by solar PVs. The reality of the solar panels, and I know some of the comments were about heights of the parapet. We've reduced the parapets a bit on this revised design, and we would pretty assuredly go with flat-mounted solar panels. That's certainly a trend now. We just did that in our office here. We have 12 solar panels on top of our office, and they are all mounted flat at less than 6 inches off the surface of the roof. So we feel that helps reduce parapet heights for those portions of the roof. Let's see, if you look to the top, got a couple of pages out from the El Pueblo Viejo guidelines, just as a reminder. Generically speaking, we're trying to build on the designs that are included in the guidelines, not trying to copy them or mimic them closely. There's certainly a wide range of acceptable styles or acceptable detailing within these styles that it's carefully noted here. And then one comment that didn't actually make the critical list that we'll talk about, but was brought up last meeting, was a particular facade that had, I think, a sliding door in one end and one other punched opening. And the feeling was, or the comment was, that that was too sparse. And just to call your attention to page 27, the office building at 30 East Figueroa Street happened to have been done by Commissioner Lenvik. One of the notable areas is the fact that there are, sparsely punctured stucco walls. And we feel like there is a good balance between the amount of wall and opening, and there's nothing necessarily detrimental to having fewer openings in a given facade. So if we can get into the elevations on the next sheets, you'll see the intent. What we've done is we've gone with a 9-foot plate height for the first floor, and at the gable roofs, to make the gable roofs work the way we'd like them to get a little bit of extra vaulted area inside the upper units, we've gone to a 10-foot plate height. So that's 19 feet to the upper plate, plus the floor structure, or whatever it might be. So we've really cut down the overall height. You can see that the front building doesn't surpass the 23 feet of the existing building, and the rear building does, only because that back gable is a little bit wider than the front two. So it stands at 23.6 above grade at the back portion of the site. Again, the site does slope up a few feet, about 5 total from front to back. So there's the difference in how the buildings step. You can see even with the flat parapets, we brought them up taller than the plate height of the gabled portions to help hide anything and everything that could be up there. But again, we don't need too much area to hide the solar panels, because the intent would be not to slope them at all. You can see the archway openings in general. We've tried to create those whenever there was an opening into a unit or an opening into the carport. Any major windows on the gable ends will have an arch. On the upper west elevation, you can see how the terraces are created. In some cases, it's a void between the gable roof and the flat roof, but other cases, it's a completely recessed with a large archway to create some 3-dimensionality there at those spaces. Again, the intention is to have a large open garden with large trees and stuff between the 2 new buildings there, as shown on the west elevation. We can go to the next page and look at some of the end elevations. So the south elevation for building 2 is the only place where we've got parking under a building. And pursuant to the comments, we tried to alleviate the more contemporary flat covering there at the carport. So we brought in a couple of archways. We built in some massing to either side to help land the building a little more forcefully on the edges. And again, create some three-dimensionality there as we need it for the covered parking areas. You can see the tiled stairways as they go up to the upper units. Again, each entryway, each stair is private to the person who has the unit up there. So that's kind of a nice aspect of the revised layout. And in general, you'll see lots of smaller arch windows and openings and or just recesses for the facades at the gable roofs. And then where we went to the flat roofs, we tend to go with a squared off French door or a glass door or a window opening to have a little bit of difference between the two systems. Again, we're looking mostly at the Meridian Studios as inspiration. And then if you go up to the number 6 drawing there, the solar height, we did take a look at that. And clearly with these reduced heights, we're not in any danger with the north side of the property line. Each one is well within the code dictated height limit. So if we go to the final page, we'll basically look at the neighboring. So we did a quick 3D model with the information. The number 6 vicinity aerial with 3D massing shows commercial building on the left of us, our front gable roofed apartment building. It shows our next 2-story building in total envelope. And then it shows the neighboring 2-story gable roofed apartment building next to us. And you can see that we don't actually block any westerly views really from that bar apartment building. Our building is pushed back to be in line with their carports and garages. And then if we pan around this sheet, you'll see the section here. The section shows cutting the very front part of our front 2-story building with the parking below and the apartment building to the east. That's not at the peak level of the roof. Obviously, it's cut further back, but that's the idea. There is an offset there because that's a 2-story building with 8-foot plate heights to our estimation on a slightly lower grade. But again, most of our building is adjacent to the parking garages in the back there shown. And then if we
sorry, if I could just jump in for a second here, and just a point of clarification. So can you point out where the parking garage of the next door neighbors that you're talking about on the 3D aerial? I think I know, but I want to make sure I'm understanding it right.
3D aerial, it's the 90-degree L-shaped piece in the back that's lower.
So
Right
that's
there.
all parking,
Yes.
parking structure? Okay.
Yeah, if we pan down, we'll see the site plan layout there. And you see how those work. So those are carports, they're open carports. And then the 2, you can see the section line exaggerated there, literally is right at the edge of our building and the edge of their building.
Gotcha. Okay.
So our buildings, none of the new buildings, as far as the commercial property next door to the west, none of our buildings are adjacent to their building at all. It's all parking lot back there. So I think that does it. Do we want to bring up that the list of items? I can quickly run through those.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Yep.
So one, we got element massing acceptable. We stuck with that same idea, obviously. Parapet's good. We try to keep those as low as possible. So the too much above plaster windows, we did by lowering plate heights resolve that. We feel to some degree, in other cases though, we think that it looks right to us from a aesthetic point of view at this point. Massing of the parking garage, we obviously reduced the garage from 9 total spaces to 4. Well, 3 spaces and an ADA aisle. So we feel like we've done that. There are no corner window treatments. We clearly have columns or archways with columns at every corner now. No wood siding is planned. We talked about the off-site adjoining buildings. We did show the perspectives of those buildings as well and even modeled them in 3D. We did show the cross-section and how we might affect the 2 neighboring properties. We did address the solar access issue. And then we've removed metal shrouds completely. And the parking, yes, number 13, our response to the new parking layout is, really a fall on number 13.
Great. All right, thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Absolutely. Okay, so with that, let's open public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please follow the instructions and raise your hand virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wish to comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And I do not see anyone at the moment who has raised their hand. May I ask Heidi if we received any written correspondence?
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair, no, we did not receive any written correspondence on this item.
And Mr. Chair, still no raised hands, so please back to you.
Does your dog want to
Okay.
speak on this issue?
Yes, he
Or
does.
raise your barking
Saying,
voice.
I want to go for walks. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, so we'll close public comments and back to the commission for questions. So commissioners, oh, and if you could turn on your webcam cameras, and then we can have questions followed by comments. Commissioner House.
First question would be on the second floor on the flat roof sections. Are those also 10-foot plate heights?
The flat roof we kept at 9 plate height for the lower level and the upper level at a flat roof.
Okay, but the gable-ended parts have a 10-foot plate height, huh?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, we thought that getting the, because we will utilize the open inside area. So we felt it was, whenever you're joining the gables to the flat roofs, it's how do the parapets match and cut into those gables. So we feel like this was a good mix of letting the parapets be a little bit above the part of the sloped roof, but not the peaks. So detailing wise, we felt it worked best this way.
Okay, the only other question I had is on the covered parking, the accessible space. I don't know this offhand, but is there a requirement for 8-foot 2-inch or whatever it is vertical clearance?
Yes, I believe it has to be a van space. So we will have to look at that arch.
Okay, that's it for questions.
All right, thank you. Other commissioners with questions? All right.
Question, just to follow up on that last
Oh,
one.
yes, that's your
So
house.
if that's an issue, is there any reason that you couldn't just make the accessible parking in the uncovered parking area?
Yeah, we thought about that too. We felt like if the city allows us to, we could absolutely do that.
Seems like it's compliant, so, okay.
Yeah, it's equal access, right? So we didn't want to at first, exclude that from being covered, but we think that that's a possibility.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners? I actually had one more. If we can go to the vicinity, the aerial perspective, the massing perspective. and I don't know if it's just missing in this model or what. I'm trying to find the back buildings because I see the existing is the hip roof one, and then I see the big rectangle of the first or the middle building, I should say, and then isn't there a back building?
There is. We were still developing that building when this thing got completed, and we were doing it in reference to its sectional, adjacency to the
Relationship to the side.
Yeah, and we felt that was the most logical one. We started down that path. We changed the back building and didn't get it updated.
Gotcha. And then can we go to the site plan view of the buildings? I just want to confirm make sure I understand what the different buildings are. Okay, so the neighbor back building, that's not the carport or not the parking area one, that's the L shape, but the following one, the further back one, what is that?
That is a 2-story apartment building from another parcel. There is that zoned OR was I guess originally going to be an alleyway potentially, because we had at one point way back the possibility of bringing cars in there along that zoned OR strip, but we since found out that wouldn't be possible, so we gave up on that. That was before my time in this.
Okay. Okay. That was it for my questions. Any other questions before we go to comments? All right. Why don't we go to comments now? Any commissioners want us? And so let's, Ms. Plummer, do we want to give comments because this is still going to go to Planning Commission, and so this is not an appealable decision, so this is just for comments only, and we want to indicate what would be the most helpful things for us to be reviewing at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this project will actually be going to the staff hearing officer for review of the open yard modification that they're requesting. So that is the next step for this project. So I would ask in your comments that you discuss the aesthetic appropriateness of the open yard modification being requested. And in addition, if you are going to forward it to the staff hearing officer at this meeting, you should go through the project compatibility criteria for the benefit of the staff hearing officer and note how it is meeting the criteria at this point. And when it eventually comes back for project design approval, you will make an official decision on those criteria. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
So just to be clear, sure, Commissioner House, go ahead. No.
For the benefit of anybody that's watching this on TV and for the benefit of refreshing my memory, could you please show us again where the requested modification is? I think it's in the front of the building of the existing, isn't it?
Mr. Vermillion, you can come on and present that.
There we go. Wouldn't let me unmute there for a moment. So yes, exactly. The existing stair here is what really we're talking about. So the existing stair, if you can see my cursor.
Mr. Vermillion, we can't see your cursor, so if you could just give verbal instructions.
Right. So the outdoor modification is for the lower unit to the west and the upper unit. The upper unit existing balcony that you get to the front door is not 6 feet wide, therefore it doesn't meet AUD. So we originally back, if you remember, we were relocating the stair and making that an extra deep veranda for that unit's open space to meet the AUD. We now prefer that we leave all of that existing because of the character of the existing building, and we would simply move the last run of stairs. So that would affect the private yard facing west for the lower unit and then the upper yard. It's only affecting the private outdoor unit space required by AUD. All the common areas are shared by all the units. So it's just it can't, we don't have a space 10 feet wide to give to that private yard on the ground floor, and we don't have a space 6 feet wide to give to the upper unit unless we reconfigure the stair and entry balcony.
Mr. Chair,
Gotcha. Yes, Commissioner Lenvick.
didn't we take some action on that front building upper deck width previously? We endorsed some modification at that front building previously?
You were in the process of understanding, and it was before my time on the project. So we did have something in a previous one that changed that, but what the comments were was that it was changing the look of that open rail access to that upper unit so dramatically that it fell out of the style with the rest of the building, if that makes sense. So we agreed and said we don't want to change the character of the existing building. It's just a caveat that we need a slight modification to allow, we can hit the overall size of the outdoor space. It just can't meet the minimum widths is all. So it's existing,
Does
not
that answer your question, Commissioner Lenvick?
Yeah, thank you. I can make comments if you want at this point.
Let's get any other questions real fast, and you can kick us off with comments. And just want to confirm we're all good and understand the modification, open yard modification, and then just as a primer for it, if you all could comment on in general how you felt they responded, especially if there are items that you didn't feel satisfied with that we brought up last time, especially. You can bring up anything new as well. That's all fine and good, because obviously this is a new design in addition. But also if you can make sure to comment on how you feel that those things are being addressed. All right, and Commissioner Lenvick, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. Yeah, I am really pleased with this solution. I think they address our concerns that we expressed at the last meeting regarding circulation, auto circulation, and they have arrived at a good plan solution, and their architecture is, we could always complain about something, but I think their architecture is very appropriate and acceptable, and I have no problem with anything I see here. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right, Vice Chair House.
I would echo those comments. I think this is a vastly superior solution to what we have seen in the past, both in terms of the site planning and the architecture. The only thing I was focused on was relative to the question I asked about the plate height of the flat roof section. And I was convinced that that must be also 10 feet as well as at the gable-ended sections, because of the way the relationship of the parapet looked to the pitched roof. And I was thinking if that was 10 feet, I would prefer, well, I mean, an argument could be made that the volume space ceiling could be lowered because you get the height of the volume, and so the plate could be lower, but that further compounds kind of the play of the massing. So I was thinking if flat roof sections were 10 feet, those would benefit by coming down to 9. So you got a better interplay of those masses. But if in fact that's 9, I think that's the best that can be done. But yeah, I think it's very, very attractive. And I really appreciate the effort the applicants put into this and working with us.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Edmonds, did you want to jump in on comments here?
Because I was absent when this was originally presented, I think I need to abstain, but staff could tell me otherwise. However, it's very attractive. I have to agree. I can't comment on the architectural details that Commissioner House is commenting on, but you know, it's a very attractive project. I think it's going to be very nice for the neighborhood.
Right, thank you. Ms. Plummer, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Commissioner Edmonds, that's correct. If you haven't watched the prior video at least for this project and are not familiar with the project itself, then you would need to be limited to questions only, not comments, but for the future, thank you.
It is a kind of new project though. Commissioner Mahan.
Yeah, I agree with all those comments. I think the project is very appropriate to El Pueblo Viejo, and my recollection is we gave a thumbs up to the modification in front a long time ago. So I think it's time to move this project on. We're not supposed to make any appealable decision, right? We just continue this project?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
I'd
with
make
comments to the staff hearing officer and
I'd make a motion to continue this project. But where's it going? Where are we continuing? Where are we
Ms.
continuing?
Plummer, do you want to help us out with this?
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Chair,
I
and
think
to
you're muted.
Commissioner Mahan. This project needs to go to the staff hearing officer for official review of that open yard modification. So it would be an indefinite continuance to the staff hearing officer. And I would ask that whoever the motion maker is, that they include specific language about the aesthetic appropriateness of that modification being requested, as well as going through the project compatibility criteria and including why it meets those criteria. Thank you.
So I make a motion to continue this to the staff hearing officer with our comments that the modification, front yard modification, is acceptable to us, and making the compatible criteria findings. The project is consistent in design with our guidelines. Very much so. I think it's really come a long ways. Compatible architectural character is appropriate to the city and to the neighborhood, and the appropriate size, bulk, and scale. The size, bulk, and scale is appropriate, and sensitivity to adjacent landmarks. I guess there's nothing really close by that it would have to be sensitive to. Oh yeah, I guess down on the corner there, that's the old 3A's building. The architecture is very, very appropriate now to El Pueblo Viejo. The public views are not an issue, and open space and landscaping is not an issue either. That's my motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
All right.
And if it's
All
okay
right.
with,
Second by Vice Chair Howe.
we should probably add that it can return to the HLC for PDA at the next review.
Okay.
And then I had a question on the elevations, if we could go back to those, the last slide we were looking at. In the flat roof sections in the upper corners, are those scuppers for overflow, or are those something else?
Those were an ode to the Meridian Studios. They're tiles stacked with a little ventilation. It's just there's just some air pass through there. That's open roof up there. So we can go to the last slide and look at that image. I've got an image of those, just for clarification. Sorry, the second last. If you zoom in on that picture of yes. Right, there you go. The detail that we thought was a handsome detail that we wanted to include.
I would just comment about that if they're serving as overflows, you shouldn't see sky through them, and should keep that in mind.
Okay.
And just now that we have a motion and a second and under discussion, I would, this doesn't need to be in the motion, but I would, because it's going to be coming back for design approval. But I would say that the only kind of general thing to start looking at, now it's a subtle detail, is the thickness of the wall in the corners. And if we can go to the elevation real fast on the corner where the arches are, and I think you got it right on a number of them, but then there's a few that they're a little bit wimpy. You have to zoom in on the bottom bottom right, east elevation, maybe. And I think there might even be one that's even a little bit wimpier than that one, actually on the other side of it. But basically, when the arch springs and where it'll thrust to the side, you're gonna want that wall to be a little bit thicker. Yeah, it's a little bit weak there, but especially on the bigger arches. And I think there's other elevations as well, just as an item just to continue your study as you develop it along the way. So.
I would suggest,
okay.
I would suggest a minimum of 14 inches.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think you can see it really well. That north elevation, building 3, that was the worst offender. The biggest arch with the skinniest little support. It's feeling like that might kick out from underneath it. So, anyway, it's very minor, but
14 inches is nice.
Understood.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Agreed.
So, okay, with those comments, any other things that under discussion? Any other? Commissioner Uli.
Yes. You guys are going a little too fast for me.
Sorry.
The only thing I noticed, this is a good place to see it, on the north and east elevation, the left-hand side of this north elevation where the gable end pops out of plane from the lower floor has a little scallop to it, you'll see there. And then when you go to the east elevation, that same second floor gable pop out of plane with the ground floor doesn't articulate that. So I know we're going to see this in detail. I'm not convinced that little scallop is the way to do it. It doesn't have enough substance, like it's holding something up. So might consider corbels or some other thing that looks like it's holding structure. I just add that comment to the list to come back.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussions? And yeah, sorry, we did Zoom. Commissioner Mahan jumped the gun and made a motion. He was just off to the races.
No, I'm all for moving it forward. I'm all for moving it forward.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's not any other discussion, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take the roll call vote now. We'll start with Commissioner Edmonds.
Abstain.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes, yes, yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yeah.
That is unanimous with 1 abstention. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, nice work. Okay, we are 2 minutes ahead, and we are on to item 4. Is the applicant here? Are we good to proceed to the next item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant is present.
All right. Okay, let's roll on to item 4, 1221 Anacapa Street. This is a continued item. This is for concept review. This is a proposal to construct a new 500 kilowatt solar photovoltaic system on the upper level of the city-owned Granada garage located in EPV that will also function as a parking canopy. The superstructure will have a maximum height of 47 feet 3 inches and consist of high-strength steel columns and beams with galvanized light gauge steel purlins on top to support and attach the solar modules. Perimeter planters will be installed to soften the edges of the solar canopy. The project also includes the removal of existing rooftop light poles and 13 small olive trees in pots to allow for the new solar photovoltaic canopy. Planning Commission review and approval is required to exceed the standard height limit of 45 feet in the commercial general high density residential priority housing overlay CG zone. And this is for concept review. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. The project was last reviewed on July 22nd, 2020. And so just before we get started, once you introduce yourselves and we'll we'll go through the motion from last time, and Ms. Plummer, if you want to add any additional comments, and then we can kind of go into the presentation. All right. So does anyone want to introduce yourselves to the team?
Hi, Chair Grumbine. My name is Alelia Parento, and I'm the City of Santa Barbara's Energy and Climate Manager. And I'm going to just lay some context for the project, and then the project team will step in. We have Ed DeFincente, Courtney Miller, and Henry Lenny from our design team who are going to be presenting the revisions. So first, Ms. Plummer, did you have anything to add before I start?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Parento. So I'll just give some brief staff comments. Mr. Chair will go through the motion from the last meeting, and then the applicant can move into their presentation. So the commission should have received a memorandum prepared by Ms. Parento on this project. The next steps for this project is for it to go to Planning Commission for the community benefit height exception. So in your review of the project today, I'll ask that you consider the project compatibility criteria, how it is meeting those criteria or not, and in your comments later, when forwarding it to Planning Commission, you'll include that formally in your motion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll go through the comments from last time. All right, so the motion was to continue indefinitely with the following comments. The commission understands the need for solar, but believes it should be hidden from public views as much as possible. 2, the design for Anacapa Street appears to work best. And for the Anapamu Street frontage, it was suggested that the applicant study pulling back the panels from the parapet or dropping the solar panels along the edge to the ground level so that they are out of view from the street. 3, study the views from the from the alley, Paseos and Paseo courtyards, and include them in the next set of renderings. 4, the current design of the bougainvillea on the edge of the structure is not supportable. 5, the commission would accept less parking at the roof of the parking garage to hide the solar panels. 6, the study tilting the panels to maximize energy in hopes of reducing the number of panels. And the action was by House, second by Drury, 7-0-0. Edmonds abstained. The motion carried. All right, welcome. And go ahead and proceed with your presentation. We have our 15-minute timer here. Please try to stick to it, and if necessary, we can extend that, but we'll really try to stick to our timer.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. So as my memo stated, we have been directed through a set of numerous goals that the council has set to really deploy distributed energy resources throughout the city wherever possible. These resources include solar arrays, storage systems, energy efficiency projects, etc. So as you know, the city established a 100% renewable energy goal in 2017, with the intent of that goal being really building reliability and resilience within our city, since we're located at a particularly vulnerable position on the Southern California Edison lines. And they've also recently set a carbon neutrality goal. So we are really working as fast as we can to make these goals a reality. And this project is really one of the most impactful ways that we can do that. We have assessed all of the city facilities, and this really does provide the largest renewable capacity of any city facility. Furthermore, I wanted to say that time is of the essence with this project, not only because of the public safety power shutoff threats that we continuously face, but also because the investment tax credit, the federal tax credit that makes this project possible, will be reducing in the near future, so threatening the project viability. Recently, council reiterated their commitment to these types of developments at the joint Planning Commission and council meeting. You may have seen that, where every council member did reiterate that they supported deploying solar wherever possible throughout the city, and contemplated modifying the Planning Commission requirement for approval for height exemptions. So I just wanted to reiterate that before I hand it off to Ed and the team.
Thank you, Lelia. All right, can you hear me? I had technical difficulties right when we started, so.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Excellent. So yes, thank you, Chair and fellow commissioners. Yeah, this is our third time before you, or the project's third time before you. And we listened very carefully to the comments that you've made to date in all the presentations, and are really working as best we can to kind of balance all of these requirements. So we'll take you through the presentation and what we've come up with, and I'll make sure at the end that we've covered all the comments raised last time. So on the screen is the updated drawings. And so we took a look at it into the next page, Timmy. And again, just we'll use this to reorient. So on top of the Granada garage, we've got existing planters there. And this is where the superstructure really for the solar array is proposed to go. So here's the trees here will be replaced with columns because these are designed for point loads, and even at the perimeter as well, where we're bringing the columns down of the array. So this is on top of this is where we're building the superstructure to span the parking bays, which are about 65 feet, and then place the solar array. So we did have Ameresco, the vendor, look closely at optimizing the angles and of the panels and the spacing. And really where we landed is that's the optimized solution was what you saw earlier in the year with a fully sloped structure, which was much more visible. And so really what we have for you today is no change to the structure. That optimization was done last time. We double checked our spacing, individual panel orientation, and what we presented last time is the optimized layout for the structure to make it work. So next page. That will show the full array. So this is the same layout as you saw last time. So because of this and looking at what's optimized, we're really left with just what's visible and how are we mitigating that? So as you recall, last time we proposed around the perimeter on the east and south portions along Anapamu and Anacapa, a planter off the edge of the array. So that's what we're going to walk through today is really a different mitigation plan that we believe is more successful. Next page. So just quickly, elevations, we can come back to these. The presentation and graphics are really in the next PDFs. Really no change to the elevations except on the Anapamu edge. So if you zoom into the top elevation there, where previously we had planters at the edge, we've come up with a different solution, and that is to do a landscape screen from the back of the parapet up to the structure and provide a different way to plant and screen the structure. So why don't we go into the renderings package and let's take a closer look at this. So again, here's the array, and just if you could zoom in a little bit. The orange dots are where the major columns are again, where the planters are. The red lines are the main beams going across, the blue are the cross beams, and then some intermediary structures for the array. So this just gets you kind of oriented to why the structure is where it is in relation to the garage. And again, because of, number one, the existing condition that we're optimizing, and then where the array sits on top of that. So as you recall last time, and we'll look at the photo sims, to the northeast portion along Anapamu Street, or sorry, Anacapa Street, it really wasn't visible. So we'll look at that in just a minute. So if you can go back, Timmy. We're really focusing on the Anapamu side on the southwest, which was more impactful. So we have a green line there that you'll see, and that's really where we're proposing to place that screen. So let's go to the next page. So I'll start here in this section, kind of in the middle of the screen, and then I'll let Henry and Courtney kind of talk through the solution in the graphics, how it starts to look. So as you can see where the vehicle is, it's got like a raised edge there, like a sidewalk. at the front of the vehicle existing, and that's where we propose to put planters and to grow up that screen to the edge of the structure to really screen the structure from down below. So in EPV, many times, as you're all aware, many times it comes before you, one of the requirements is when mechanical equipment is visible to provide screening. So as far as from a compatibility standpoint, we're really approaching it the same way. Is we know it's not practical to raise the entire parapet. That would change the architecture quite a bit. And we also looked at lowering the structure to the deck. And as you saw in the applicant letter to you, that's not going to be possible for other reasons that the city has for the structure. So additional vehicle charging has been added there. There's an employee parking program that focuses on using the rooftop areas or underutilized areas of the parking garage. Again, these areas, this is addressed in the letter, and we can certainly come back to that as to why we could not lower the whole structure. So we really are left with the structure and how do we mitigate that? So with that, I'm gonna let Henry kind of talk through what we've come up with, and Courtney as well, and then we'll flip through some of the additional views. Henry, it sounds like
I'm
you're
not
muted.
getting
Mr. Lenny, I
any-
think you're muted.
Yeah, hang on just 1 second. It looks like the microphone is on, but I'm not getting any sound coming out.
Oh, I just turned it on. Sorry, I had it
Okay.
on.
Now we hear you. Thank you for confirming.
Oh, sorry about that. If we can go on, there's a rendering on Upper Moore Street, which I think could explain, I think the concept much better. It's perspective, if you can keep going on. Yep, that's the one. This perspective was actually taken for a photograph, and this is where the structure was most visible. Courtney and I and the rest of the team, we explore other planning materials, and again, we came back to the conclusion that the bougainvillea would probably be the best choice, and Courtney can talk to that a little bit more. But as you can see, really from the street view, the building in the foreground will actually screen quite a bit of the structure, at least the middle of the structure to the top. But the idea would be to have that screen that it spoke about a few minutes ago and completely saturated with the bougainvillea. And then it turns the corner and it begins to recede to the point that you can't see it anymore, at least from Anacapa Street. Next picture. You can actually see this is taken from the courthouse tower, and this will give you an idea of what it is that we're proposing clearly here. The structure is not impactful on Anacapa Street, but again, this is the area where it's most impactful. Next picture.
That's the last graphic.
That's the last graphic, okay.
Yeah, why don't we turn to back to the landscape sheet so we can have Courtney describe to the commission in more detail. Back to the renderings package. I believe it's sheet 2. There we go. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ed. So as Ed and Henry mentioned, we're proposing a very simple metal mesh screen, which would extend from a lightweight GFRC planter up to the structural beam overhead. You can see on the left, we're suggesting potentially a McNichols product or something similar which essentially would disappear over time because it would be obscured by the vine. This would be, a stainless steel with a powder coat, and we're suggesting a rust color, which has the cloud around it, to match the beam up overhead. And we did do a lot of research. I know there were some comments regarding the bougainvillea at the last meeting. We did a lot of research about what vine would be appropriate for this location, considering, extreme sun exposure, limited soil profile, minimal water. And most vines that you see around town actually are medium water use plants. And so really the only thing that I think would work in this environment is the bougainvillea. It can be a little bit messy, but luckily in this particular location on the building, there's actually a lower level of the adjacent, kind of part of the structure where somebody could easily access that adjacent lower roof and maintain the vine pretty easily. So, it's very vigorous. They're ever blooming in a mild environment. So the flowers will probably happen year round unless we get a really cold snap. And they can take the full sun and the minimal water. The other thing that I thought was interesting about bougainvillea is it has really strong cultural heritage in California and, very specific connection to the history of Spanish colonial revival architecture in Southern California. So along the bottom of this page, you can see there's some photos on the left and then some historic postcards or, vintage postcards on the right. So the furthest left photo is Casa del Herrero, and then just next to that is the Lobero building on Anacapa. And there's also a really beautiful specimen, as I'm sure everyone's aware, on the courthouse building. And so you can see it really can be a very vigorous vine. I don't think, these are planted in the ground, so we're going to be dealing with a little bit more limited soil, but as I said, they're extremely hardy, and the flower actually is more prolific in extreme heat. So I think, this is sort of a perfect environment for them. And then just to the right of the Lobero building, that is a postcard image of the Potter Hotel. So I thought it was interesting just, looking at how it's been used both in Santa Barbara and throughout California too, in and around the turn of the century. So all three and actually four of these postcards on the right are all from about 1915 in that era. And actually, I did find something that said the earliest written, what does it say? The earliest written description of bougainvillea in California comes from the Santa Barbara Morning Press, which talks about two beautiful specimens who were planted side by side at the De La Vina Street garden of physician L. Norton Dimick. So I thought that was really wonderful, and we hope you agree. I think that
Great.
concludes
So let
our
me
presentation.
not quite yet. Let me pull up the Sims. So these are Sims that you've seen previously, and we've also added some additional ones. So let's quickly get through that. Timer just jumped about a minute from where I was, so
Yeah, I
that's
think it's fine
vaporized.
to have a couple minutes here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So let's go back to the first image. So it's one of the benefits of starting early. Okay, so as Henry noted, this is the first view where it was the array was most visible from Anapamu Street. So we went out and took a new photograph, and then Henry did his rendering overlay with the technical background. We superimposed the solar array, and then kind of designed the screen frequency and also the height with Courtney's help, as you saw in her details. So this is the proposed view of that, and again with the bougainvillea in full bloom. Next page. Next page is really no change to what you saw last time. So on top is the photograph along Anacapa Street. and then the previous photo sim from March with the taller structure and what we presented last time, which stays the same from this view at the bottom. We're really pulling back the array and flattening it. It's no longer visible from the Anacapa side. Next page. Similarly to the north side of the structure, just looking back, the photograph of current view on the top, the previous design of the slope structure in the middle, and then the current proposed design. Again, no change on this side. You can just see where the array is not visible. Next page. From on top of the structure, really no change here other than we remove the perimeter planting on the bottom view. Next page. Then we get to some new views the commission asked for. First, this is just, again, the courthouse tower view. So next page, you've all seen this one. And the two new views. So from the Granada Plaza, parking plaza, just to the west of the structure. So looking toward the southwest facade, on the top is the existing photograph. At the bottom is the proposed array from this vantage point. And we're not proposing to extend the screen upward on this point. It's just not as heavily trafficked. So that's something we'd like the commission's input on. And the last photo, next, is just looking the other direction down the other alley. So here again from the parking plaza of the Granada, just looking toward the north edge of the structure, you can see the array, a little tighter angle, so it's less visible from this side, but these are two views that the commission asked for. So that pretty much covers, I want to make sure we covered all the comments from last time. It does. We kind of interspersed throughout the way we answered the question. So really, I just want to reiterate, again, we did look at very carefully what we could do with the structure, working with some of the broader issues of the parking garage. And we just weren't able to really shrink the structure because the project wouldn't pencil or drop it down to the deck. So we're left with this, is there a better strategy to mitigate the views that are there? And again, this is a consistent thing in EPV where we have to mitigate mechanical equipment, et cetera. And so hopefully this is a more agreeable to the commission than the planters that we had before, and we look forward to your input. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so if that concludes your presentation, we will go on to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this project, please follow the instructions and raise your hand virtually.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel to indicate that you wish to speak. And I do not see anyone at the moment who's raised their hand. I would like to ask Heidi if we received any written correspondence, please.
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair, no, we did not receive any written correspondence for this item.
So during the time that wall was here.
And then just for the
All right.
applicants, if you could please mute yourselves while you're not speaking or while you're not on. And Mr. Chair, I don't see any other hands raised, so please go ahead.
All right, thank you. All right, back to the commission for questions. Start with questions. Commissioner or Vice Chair House?
My understanding is that these mesh panels are 4 feet wide. I did not see anything on the plans that indicates the spacing between them. And I'm also wondering why you didn't opt to just make it a solid screen, because I see the bougainvillea totally obscuring that side of the structure. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be achieved if there's a large space between the panels, which looked like the space was at least equal to the width of the panels. Also, I'm curious, what is the depth of that primary steel beam that's parallel to that facade?
All right, want to field those questions?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, Commissioner Mahan?
A question to the, question to the applicant. at the last time we saw this, we asked that from the street, these wouldn't be seen, but it seems like they're still hanging over, at least on the Paseo side, on the two Paseo sides, a little bit. And I just wonder, why do they have to hang over a little bit? If can't we push them back enough so that they won't be seen from the street or for the parking lot or any place on the ground? That's the question.
All right, so I think you got like 4 questions. Okay, so I think you got like 4 questions to answer. So we got the, why don't we start with Commissioner Mahan's and then work through Commissioner Vice Chair House's. So the first one is what, couldn't you pull back pull the panels back on the edges so you don't see them from the Paseos and from the, yeah.
Yeah, let's go to the renderings package on page 1. Thank you, Timmy. If you could zoom in there. So we looked at this both for the July presentation and now, and this was pulled back significantly on the Anacapa side here to the upper right. And that's just for that reason. So would not be visible. And to the other locations, if we were to further reduce, it's just not gonna pencil out. And this is also, as the applicant, in the applicant letter, this is one of the few areas where we could have a contiguous set of panels or size this large to achieve the broader goals. So it's really a financial one that goes to the feasibility. We're having to choose where to pull back. And based on the previous discussions with the commission, pulling back on Anacapa was the preferred location. Could we pull back from the other views? I don't know if the project would pencil. For working with the vendor, it would be a risk to the whole project. So because of that, we've come up with these other mitigation strategies. So specifically to where we're putting that starts to look. So if you could go to, I think 2 pages forward in this package, we'll go to that elevation view, Courtney. There we go. And while this is coming up, the beam at the edge here is about 30 inches deep. And this just goes to the spans because, again, of the limited area where we have the columns and the spans across the parking areas, they're fairly deep structure. So it's 30 inches deep on this side. So Courtney, I'll let you take it from there.
Thanks, Ed. Chair Grumbine and Commissioner House. If you could actually, Timmy, flip to the page prior to this. I want to focus on the photo at the upper left. So to answer the question about how the panels were placed, you know, we went up there, we studied this, and the views from this roof deck are actually really incredible, in particular of the courthouse. And so there's a couple of reasons why we did not extend the mesh all the way solidly across that elevation. One is to have some opening so that people could take in the views from that side of the building. But the other is for maintenance reasons, so that, you know, there was somewhere to kind of get in between those mesh screens. And then I'll also mention that, you know, we like the idea of following, you know, the design of the parapet, as you can see. So the width of those mesh panels would match the width of the taller portion of the parapet that you can see there, the flat portion. And I don't know if I measured that specifically, so I'm not sure of the exact dimension there. But we thought it was a little overkill to have it, you know, covering the entire thing. And so the idea is that the vines will grow up the mesh and then be directed across the face of the beam along the street. So there'd be wire along the beam as well to help the vines grow across it.
Mr. Chair, I have one more question.
Okay, Vice Chair House.
You specified California Gold as the bougainvillea, and I've always been under the impression that the magenta, or whatever you call it, scarlet, is the most hardy version. So could you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, we looked both at the California Gold and the Barbara Karst, which is that magenta pink. I think either one would be okay or suitable for this. The hardiness is the same. The difference and the reason why we chose the gold is because it can be a little bit longer blooming. You know, most of them bloom off and on year round, but if it is cold, then the California Gold will start blooming earlier in the spring than the Barbara Karst. But I think either one would be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Mayhem.
Yeah, I don't feel like my question's been answered yet. Can we go back to the views from the street, looking up at the west elevation and the north elevation of where the panels are overhanging? The west elevation and the north elevation. Yeah,
Are you
no,
talking
that's.
about from the Paseo?
Should be slide
Yeah, I'm
6 and
talking
7.
about the Paseo and the yeah, right, that one right
Granada.
there.
There we go.
That's overhanging right there. Is it possible to detail that soffit so that it's more traditional looking? Right now, it's just a steel structure, right? Is that true?
Correct.
Is it possible to detail it so that it's more traditional, a more traditional soffit?
Are you speaking of the edge of the beam structure there below the panels?
Yeah, the soffit. Yes, the soffit. Could that, for instance, on the Amazon building on the corner of Carrillo and State Street has a soffit. It has a fiberglass beams that are, you know, they're not structural, but they're detailed to be traditional looking. Can this soffit be detailed to be traditional looking?
I mean, we also looked at examples of the canopy, like in front of Cottage Hospital, for example. And there is more detail there on the ends that's more like traditional architecture. So yes, I think that's something we could look at with the vendor. As soon as we get past where the column point is, we could look at some kind of more traditional detailing. And again,
that could also happen on the north elevation where it's overhanging on the north elevation in that Paseo.
That's correct. Yeah, this was still the bigger picture discussion. And if that's the direction the commission would go, yes, we could certainly take that into consideration. But yes, there's good examples of it around town with other canopies and things that we've seen as well.
Yeah, Bill, I think there's a number of possible solutions, and one of them would be a iron shroud or a trim piece that could probably work very well. Your idea of making it look more like an outrigger, like an overhang, more traditional with an edge.
Yes.
I don't see why that couldn't happen. I agree with you.
That's my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Lembick.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm on, I believe, aren't I? I have a number of questions. If we could go to the plan that shows the framing, I would appreciate that. There was a landscape plan that showed the beams, yada, yada, yada. There. If you could zoom in on that. I have several questions regarding this framing. Number one, Mr. Mahan, what you realize here is there's no soffits, it's all structure. Number one. My question for the designers is why can't the blue beams be flush down so the top of the blue beams are the same height as the top of the red beams, thereby reducing the structural height significantly?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lenvik, as designed, the blue beams are at the same top of beam height as the larger.
Then let's go to the let's go to the architect or to the landscapes drawing that shows the Jeep Cherokee right there. So what do I see as those elements that are sticking up there above the big beam? There.
I believe that is the solar array. I think that was,
No,
you
no.
know, a
It appears
conceptual.
to me those are the purlins, the blue beam purlins, and they're sitting on top of the red beam.
No, sorry, Commissioner Lembeck, I believe that my drafting team, you know, took a stab at representing the solar panels that way.
So
And
what,
so it
so
does look like a traditional trellis design, but I don't think that's what it's supposed to be.
what's going right and left then on top of those solar panels? I don't, the question.
For clarification, hold on just one second. For clarification, can we go to maybe an architectural plan or another section and let's just make sure we're understanding the structure, right? Then we can come back here. I'm confused about which way everything's going as well.
Yeah, Chair
Sure.
Grumbine
Well,
and fellow commissioners, I think
go ahead.
let's go to the plans. The short answer is the structure is not fully detailed. Again, these are conceptual level drawings, and the intention, as we've been discussing over the last few months, is yes, our main driver is, again, the columns, which we spoke about, and then the beams that need to connect the columns, and all the rest of the structure is intended to not be on top of that, but rather sit in between at the same top. So the panels themselves would be mounted to those, you know, more minor elements between the larger beams. But again, the goal, we don't have a full detail of that. The intention is for that to be as low profile as possible. That was the redesign from the original total slope structure approach. So yes, that's the intention, and we don't have full detailing.
Okay.
It would be good to see what the reality of the detail is with regard to the structure. You mentioned in your presentation that that there on top of the purlins there's galvanized steel beams or whatever supporting the panels themselves. And I would hope that we would not end up looking up at the underside of the structure and seeing galvanized metal unpainted up there. That'd be my hope. But anyway, I continue with my questions. How much are you losing by flat panels versus slope panels? Is it a significant dollar amount?
Chair Grumbine, Commissioner Lendick, the panels themselves are sloped, and they were spread out slightly because they cast a shadow. So they are sloped a little bit. Just having them flat wasn't the optimized. I don't have all of the details they did a lot of iterations on these solar analysis. Definitely the goal is to optimize. That's getting as much solar power from the structure is critical. So I know we can get all that finer detail. The designers have all that, but I don't have the exact angles and everything right now for this particular design.
You might ask them a question. Wouldn't, what is the trade-off between the spacing of sloped panels to avoid the shadowing effect versus all flat, and you may acquire more panels in the field? I mean, that's a question I think is worth asking, because I think that flat panels would be more architecturally attractive up here. I had one other question. The rest are comments. I'll wait till everybody else has had questions. Okay. Oh, a question. Why is 8'3" clear at the bottom a requirement?
Chair Grumbine, Commissioner Lemvick, the intention there was for any van accessible spaces for accessibility to meet that building code requirement underneath the structure.
And Chair Grumbine and Commissioner Lembeck, I just wanted to weigh in on your previous question about the trade-off between sloped panels versus flat panels. Amoresco, who's the contractor, is well-versed in building large-scale solar arrays, and they have looked at every possible configuration to try and diminish the size while maintaining financial feasibility. So trust us, they've looked at it. They've looked at the difference between flattening the panels and sloping them. And unfortunately, this project is on a razor thin edge of feasibility that we're just doing our best to accommodate the visibility requirements and still maintain the project.
I have comments, but I'll wait for comments.
Okay, other questions? I had a question, and I don't mean to go back to the landscape drawings to ask about architecture, but I think that's the best detail shot of the section because it kind of has the zoom in. And so, assuming all this is pretty close to being bang on, and the beam that you have above the overhead structural beam, why, and looking at the photo, we don't need to flip to it now, but looking at the photo from the rooftop, was there or has there been another look at actually furring out from that beam a thin or some sort of a plaster wall as opposed to, and whether it sits on the current parapet or it hangs off of the structural beam and you can't see that it's hanging off it. But whatever the case, what about going plaster as opposed to trying to hide with plants all these, with all these non-EPV compliant materials? And is there a potential solution there, even if it's in the same rhythm and openings and of the parapet and all that, and even growing bougainvillea on it too? But just is there a way of covering up that steel architecture rather than trying to make it look good on a very small budget?
Yeah, Anthony, we actually did discuss all kinds of things. A colonnade, we discussed cast iron columns, such as what you would see in some Victorian architecture, all sorts of things. The problem is that in order to make it look correct, the frequency of those plaster steel columns becomes, in order to be proportionally correct, there become so many of them that you eventually get to the point in which it's no longer, the cost is no longer feasible. But we did talk and explore that possibility. I mean, if cost was no object here, we can actually do an arcade up there, and the arcade could be made out of cast iron as an example. But that blew the budget out of the water, so to speak. And so then we went back to the steel screen and the landscaping, and we found that hopefully that would barely make it. So we did brainstorm all kinds of other options to this.
Okay. Commissioner Lemnick, were you asking another question, or are you good? All right. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, let's go roll into comments. Does someone want to lead us off on comments and discussion?
Well, I guess I might as well jump in then. This project is a real conundrum for me. First of all, I think it's a very important project and I'm all for it. But what I'm having difficulty with is that it's not the correct basis of decision-making for the HLC to approve something because it's needed. just as with AUDs, we need housing, but that's not a reason for us to approve something alone. In looking at the memorandum, which I think was very well written, and I think clearly spells out why this is the ideal location for this installation. What I have a problem with is the reasons why the other suggestions we've made in the past are not something that can be explored. I mean, clearly there is no other suitable location like this for the solar installation. It says the city recently installed 30 electric vehicle charging ports. Those could be somewhere else. The city recently developed an employee parking system for city employees. There are other places to park cars. The city anticipates an increase in demand for parking as downtown housing development increases. Again, there are other places to park cars. So our charge is to follow the HLC guidelines, compatibility guidelines. And number one is compliance with the city charter and municipal code. Is the project's design consistent with design guidelines applicable to the location of the project within the city? I can't make that finding. Is the project compatible with the desirable architectural qualities and characteristics which are distinctive of Santa Barbara and the particular neighborhood? I can't make that finding. Sensitivity to adjacent landmarks, number 4. I can't make the finding that it's sensitive to the national landmark, the courthouse building. Another major point is in all the time I've served on HLC and ABR, it's always been acknowledged that landscaping is not an acceptable screen to hide inappropriate architectural design. Droughts and neglect happen, and it makes it really difficult to approve this on the basis of this landscaping concealing what we find objectionable. And I really don't like the idea of denying the project and having the city to have to, or staff to have to appeal this to city council. I inquired earlier of the city attorney and staff whether there was a possibility of taking no action, which I also recall many years ago was something that has been done while I've served on boards, but that's not a real action. There is something called the indefinite continuance, which serves the same function. But, as was recently the case with the bike share program, there is a provision in the city charter and the municipal code that if the city council determines a project is basically in the public interest, and it's not in the public interest to have the HLC involved, that seems like the best avenue as far as I'm concerned. I think that I can't vote for this. I can't imagine what could be said that would make me feel comfortable voting for this, because it just doesn't meet the guidelines and what we're charged with doing. So I think my preference would be to deny it and let the city council make the political decision that this is in the public's interest, and that solves everything, unless somebody's got a better idea.
Mr. Lenvik, do you have a better idea?
No, I don't have a better idea, but I have some comments to make.
Okay.
I think that the last time this was here, or one of the prior times it was here, I made comments about how Cottage Hospital at a number of locations had built trellises out of structural steel that were, in which the steel elements were detailed And, you know, there were OG curves and tapered beams and on and on and on. They were very, very appropriate to the beautiful architecture of Cottage Hospital. And the applicant has simply not gotten that far with their design yet, or they choose not to. And I, you know, I don't believe we have the ability under state law to deny solar panels on a building. But what our responsibility is to make sure the structure that supports them fits within the ordinances and regulations of the city of Santa Barbara. And I think that if the applicant was to come back and say, here is our real structure, everything is flush with the deepest, with the top of the deepest beam. That means the purlins and the joists, everything is flush with the top. We've reduced the structure to a minimum. If they come back and show us that maybe a piercing the steel, the major steel beam with it 30 inches deep, if they pierce that with openings and such that you know, it starts becoming an aesthetically interesting piece of structure, then that's maybe part of the solution. Right now, it's just a big raw steel beam up there, and it doesn't necessarily respect the actual functions of the structural functions of the beam. I mean, you need a deeper section in the middle, you know, where deflection occurs. You need less at the outer edge over the columns, and I think there's that, you know, you really ought to look at how you can make that structure look as attractive as possible in the Hispanic tradition, in the Mediterranean tradition. And that means tapering, that means, you know, coping the ends, that means doing a lot of things. I don't think that you can come back to us with somebody saying you got a galvanized rafter up there at 4 feet on center. I mean, they can be galvanized, but they got to be painted, and I think you got to deal with that. And the lighting that occurs under them, how is that being handled? There's so little that you've presented to us that would allow us to say, yeah, we can kind of bend a long ways here to make this thing acceptable. I don't know that you have to have handicap parking on the roof. Maybe you do. Maybe it's required by law. You know, but 8'3" is a really, really tall bottom of beam, and you could get by with, you know, 7'6" or whatever because you don't have handicap. That would be a much better solution as well. You start reducing this down to the human scale. I mean, it's unfortunate to have 8'3" around the whole thing when you've only got to have 8'3" from the top of the access ramp to you know, 3 or 4 or 5 parking spaces. So I think there's got to be further examination of how you make this structure really, really acceptable to us. And I agree with what Steve Howes has said. It's going to be real tough to make the findings. It's going to be tough to deny. It's going to be tough to say, well, we don't do the kind of things that we're doing on Anapamu Street frontage. We don't do them on the west and the north side because you can't see it. Well, you can see it. The Granada Theater is putting in a ton of money into improving that plaza between this parking garage and the Granada Theater and the Paseo Walkway. People are going to be walking down there all the time, and they're going to be looking at this structure, and it deserves the same treatment on those sides as it does on the Anapamu Street frontage. So I sympathize with cost, and you're trying to bring this in at an efficient manner from the standpoint of the cost of construction. But we're going to be living with this for 50 years or whatever, and we've got to get it right to begin with. So, well, I'm sympathetic with what Steve Howes says. I think that I would also ask the applicant to solve the problem that we deal with, so that if it does go to City Council on Howes' recommendation or suggestion, that we don't have, you know, a poor solution signed off on by the council. So those are my comments.
All right, Ms. Plummer, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Vice Chair House's comment. So just to clarify, as it's in the footer, the project is not here for appealable decision today. As the project is currently set up, HLC is the first reviewer, and the Historic Landmarks Commission would provide comments via the project compatibility criteria to Planning Commission so that they can make a determination on the height exception for community benefit projects. So that is the next step for this project. You are able to continue the project to the Planning Commission and via the project compatibility criteria include, your concerns with the project. I think, what Vice Chair House mentioned regarding the exception that City Council can make for certain types of projects may be worth considering for the applicant. It's at your discretion, but that could happen potentially, in the time that it goes to Planning Commission for the community benefit height exception. If council still thinks that HLC needs to review the project and approve the design, this project will still have to come back to the commission for project design approval and final approval, which are appealable decisions. And, they can come back with more detail, especially all those comments that Commissioner Lenvick made as well. But it is your discretion if you would like to continue it indefinitely to return to the HLC or continue it indefinitely to the Planning Commission with your comments as you have them currently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners' comments? I'll throw some of my comments in. So I think
Mr. Chair,
oh,
Mr. Chair, before you,
yes,
before you make your comments,
sure.
I think Mr. Lenvick's comments were right on. Really, the thing is that we don't mind seeing something up there. What we see up there has to be beautiful, and it has to be appropriate to El Pueblo Viejo and to our guidelines. What we're getting now is a steel structure that's just totally not appropriate. That's what we're seeing. So the applicant needs to come back with we know we're going to see something, but what we want to see is something that's beautiful and appropriate to our guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mahan. And so just to add to what other commissioners have said, and especially Commissioner Mahan about seeing things, I think one of the aerials showing the county building next door, sort of towering over this structure, and obviously right next to the Granada Theater, extremely towering over the structure. It's not a big building. We're not worried about that, especially here. It's in between two other big buildings, some of the biggest that we have, and so it's not so much the height as long as what we're looking at is beautiful. Obviously, the other option is just hide it completely from view, in which case it can be ugly and out of view from the main public view, and not be a worry. But it really is just the fact of what we see, in my opinion. And I think this rendering, the Bougainvillea is definitely an obvious great choice, and that's very supportable. I think that it was well argued for it, and the fact that it's the right type of plant for this treatment as well. I think that this rendering is a little deceptive in that it just has a wall of Bougainvillea, and it would seem that you would have more punctures in it, and maybe there are some hints of it, but the openings that you showed in elevation were a little more, I think it will be definitely a little more open, especially if it's kept trimmed. And I would say it should definitely be worth looking. I mean, in my mind, there's two ways of going about it. One is to make the structure beautiful and work like Cottage Hospital structure does, a trellis. make it work and feel proper to the architecture. And the other is to add more of the same architecture. And I don't think that some simple plaster wall opening would be a bad approach. And you might be able to get that to work on the three different sides that are visible. And so that might be a way of simply and not cost exorbitantly getting that to work and just sort of hiding the structure with actual architecture, plaster architecture. And then you can go to the bougainvillea on as well, especially if it's not the best visually in terms of having to be a hung wall or not very thick wall, like 8 inches or 10 inches. So anyways, I think that there might be a possibility in that on the plaster side of things that doesn't seem to have fully been explored, at least according to the pictures and the sections that might work with this design. So in general, I think that all the comments from the commissioners, and jump in if you feel otherwise, but are feeling that this, although the height exception might be fine and appropriate, it has to be done so with visually compatible with EPV. And right now we're feeling this design does not have that, and that reliance on plants, even if they're a good selection, is not an appropriate way of hiding the structure, because obviously they can fail in spots. And the other aspect is we do want it to be, as you worked it out on the Anapamu side, by just hiding it, we want the other side to also either be hidden from view or to be screened in a way that makes it compatible with EPV. And that includes from the Granada courtyard and Paseo's side of things. And so in general, that's the sentiment from the commission. We could, I guess it would be a question to the applicant as well, and then to the commissioners, if the applicant wants to go this route, whether they want to go on to Planning Commission with our comments about the comments that you've heard so far, or whether they want to come back to HLC with other potential solutions that might be more supportable. And obviously that's not up to the applicant as to what actually happens, but I think it would be good to hear what they would prefer, and then to see if the commissioners any commissioners want to make a motion to that effect or not.
Mr. Chair,
So
can I make
the
a
applicant,
comment? Mr. Chair?
sure. Yeah, Commissioner Mahan, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to send this to the Planning Commission for discussion on height when we don't find anything yet acceptable. I want to send it to Planning Commission with our positive comments that that the applicant has found a way to make this structure beautiful and acceptable to our guidelines. And I think it would be inappropriate to send it to Planning Commission as it is now. I think we want to send it to Planning Commission with very positive comments so that the Planning Commission will feel more comfortable in going for the height, for the mitigation for the height limit. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let's come back to that as a discussion item. Let's hear what the applicant would prefer first, and then let's continue that discussion. I think that's an important discussion. I do want to throw it out to the applicant to see even if they are even wanting to go that route, and then we can discuss it even more and see whether we. So if you would, applicant.
Chair
Do you
Grumbine,
want us to send lousy comments to Planning Commission, or do you want to come back again for HLC? In your preference.
I'll ultimately defer to my design team and Ed, but I think from the city project management perspective, we would prefer to continue the process, move to Planning Commission to at least hopefully check that box, and then come back to HLC with more of the design completed as Commissioner Lenvik requested, so that we can really tackle the feasibility issue. At this point, we've just been trying to get to that Planning Commission step. And so So that would be helpful to move to that and then come back to you with further design considerations.
Got you, Mr. De Vicente. Any other?
Let me just make a
additional-
comment, if I may. It is, in this particular project, there is issues of funding. There are issues of the height, of course. And Bill, I definitely agree with you, but the question, quite frankly, is we need to find the budget to continue working. There is no question in my mind that the structure can be turned to be beautiful and compatible to the building in many different ways. But the dilemma is, now that we know what we know, do we move on to the planning commission and then have some discussions with the city council about increasing the budget to basically begin to study the architecture and the guidelines that the Pueblo Viejo has? Right now, I agree with Ed Lenvik, and this is the preliminary, the first step to take, and everything is raw and square and bulky. I do agree with that. So the real question for Aurelia is, what do we do? I mean, I can see that we need to move forward to the next step in order to have a further discussion and then come back to all of you.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're going to go back to the commissioners now. I just wanted to get a feel for what your, what the applicant's hope was, and then we can come back to the commissioners and discuss what the commissioners are feeling, or where they want to go with it. All right, Commissioner Lenvik.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I'll make a motion to.
Hold on, just 1 second. I do want to. I told Commissioner Mahan that we would finish this good discussion. I would like to have it with all the commissioners. If there was any other comments on Commissioner Mahan's point of not feeling it appropriate to send it on to the Planning Commission without positive comments and not send it on with negative comments. If any other commissioners want to jump in on that before we go to the next. Before Commissioner Lenvik makes his motion. All right, Commissioner Lenvik, go for it.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to continue this application to allow the applicant to solve the design problems of the supporting structure.
Second that motion.
I want to finish the motion.
Excuse me, I thought you did.
I want to include certain conditions that we want them to look at. One, I believe the structure should be made as simple as possible from the standpoint of its depth, which means everything should be flush to the top of the tallest beam. Two, I think that the structural steel work should be designed in a manner which is compatible with what would be found if it was large-scale wood trellis structures, from the standpoint of brackets and radius ends and coping and OG, whatever. But it should be designed such that it is compatible with the architecture of the building. Three, the applicant should look real carefully at being able to reduce the height below 8'3" clear. And that may be that they have to eliminate, if allowed by law, accessible parking on the upper level. Four, they need to have screening or architectural elements on both the west and the north sides of the building, as they are doing on the south and east sides. Those are important views, particularly that of the Granada enclosed area behind the, or unenclosed area behind the.
Just for clarity, it's just south side right now that they're showing, they're screening on.
South is what they're showing. Yeah, you're right. They are showing nothing on the Anapamu side.
They
I mean, on
stepped
the
it back
Anacapa
from the
side.
Annapolis side.
And it kept
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
But what they need to do is they need to treat the north and the west side in a manner which also screens or makes the architecture of the structure compatible with the architecture of the building. And so, and my fourth comment, of course, was the height. And five, that when they come back, the renderings as we're looking at now on the Annapolis side should be made more accurate to reflect the openings that are in the landscaped wall, the landscape panel there. I believe those are the key things that I have made part of my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Commissioner Mahan with a second. And under discussion. So it seems like you've hit on the two things. One is making the structure actually compatible with the building, and the other is screening it. So is it a both and, or would you consider an either or? Either like Cottage Hospital, either make it look like part of the building, like wood beams or however, or screen it so you can't see it.
No, it's not either or.
Screen it appropriately.
When you're walking around on that level, getting out of your car or whatever, I think that we ought to see steel members which are architecturally compatible with the architecture. So it's not just screening it or looking at it from the exterior, but also from the interior.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the interior.
Well, when you're on the garage level, I think that the beams ought to be articulated or whatever in a manner which makes them pleasant to look at. I mean, it's either interior or exterior, and I consider that exterior, and it's got to be dealt with.
Okay, I always want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay. All right. Any other discussion on it? Commissioner, Vice Chair House.
Just for the sake of putting it out there, I'm wondering if there are going to be catwalks for servicing solar panels, and if so, is that going to require safety railings around the perimeter? So I think that question ought to be looked into and answered next time we see this project.
Yeah.
Okay. So does the maker of the motion and the seconder both agree with adding that as part of the to look into the catwalk requirement and to
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And the maker of the motion agree with that addition?
I'm good with that as well. I think what we're going to ultimately want to see, I mean, there's going to be a ton of conduit running around. We're going to want to see how they're handling the placement of that conduit ultimately. There's going to be a large structure someplace, either on this level or some level, where all of the electrical equipment and panels and rectifiers and transponders and transmogrifiers, whatever they are located. I mean, that stuff's got to be dealt with as well. But
and I think, as long as you're okay with that, it does seem the catwalk, if there is going to be a requirement, that's a big picture design issue right now that needs to be front figured out. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? All right. In that case, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote now. We'll start with Commissioner Uli.
We haven't seen his face in a while.
I see that he's still on.
Yeah.
Commissioner Uli, are you there?
I just sent Commissioner Uli a webcam request, and there he is.
Okay.
I got stuck.
Commissioner Uli, can we get your vote for the motion?
Aye.
Commissioner Lenvik?
Aye.
Vice Chair House?
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Chair Grumpine.
I'm gonna actually go no on this one.
All right. That is 5 yeses and 1 no. Motion passes. Thank you.
Would you explain
And I'll
yourself?
just clarify only that I wouldn't want to require both screening and good architecture trellising. I would say one or the other. If they get the trellis right, like Cottage Hospital, there's no need to require the screening as well. But I agreed with everything else. So it was a minor thing, but I at least said no once this month. Okay. All right. So so I guess everything should be clear to the applicant. Unless there's any other business, I think we are adjourned. All right.
Bye all.